to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Today we're talking to one of the brighter stars in the property management industry who happens to be based in Perth. Yes, we're talking with Ashleigh Goodchild from SoCo Realty. We have a chat to her about the boom of property investments in Perth, and she shares some stories and case studies about times where she's seen things that investors have purchased that she wished she could have saved them if they would have involved her earlier on in the process. But she talks to us about how she works with particularly interstate investors that are buying sight unseen. She also gives us some insights into how to be a good landlord, which I think is actually a really important concept for landlords to get behind, because being a good landlord means that you're easier to work with from a property manager's point of view. They are more motivated to look after you. The tenants are happier, and it's just one beautiful ecosystem around that property. We've got some gold from Ashleigh on a few different fronts in and around the property investing space and the future of Perth and what she sees as happening in that market as well. Always a great interview with Ash. We're glad to have her back. Here's Ashleigh. Now, for people that haven't listened to your previous episode, you are property manager to the stars over in WA, and that just happens to be a part of the world that is outperforming every capital city right now, from 2023 inclusive, all the way up to today at the point of recording. And I fairly quite comfortable say, look, it's probably going to win 2024 as well. There's an absolute gold rush for investors over there. But with that comes some opportunities, sure, but some risks as well. So I really wanted to get you on to unpack some of those. So can you talk to us about some of the services that you provide to these investors that are coming into your beautiful city of Perth?
Yeah, so this happened it would have been about 3 years ago that we started seeing that interest come through from interstate investors. And I remember at the time that happening, and I saw a lot of investors getting not messed around by sales agents, but they really didn't understand how WA works, because we work very different in that we don't have a cooling off period. It is you can't negotiate your contract or your offer after the building and pest inspection's done. There was a lot of things that people were learning along the way, and selling agents weren't explaining this to the investors buying, because maybe they just assumed they knew. And I could see there was a bit of panic happening with bringing in the investors into the sales area industry. So I jumped in and thought I'll start helping these investors, making sure that they understand how to buy in Perth, but also make sure that they're not buying a dud of a property that they're now going to want me to look after. So the intention was very selfish, that I want you to buy a good property that's easy for us to look after. So we started working a lot with the investors, and within 3 months of us doing that, I'm not kidding you, I would have been doing maybe 30 to 40 home open pre-purchase inspections every weekend, like ridiculous amounts. I don't even know how I managed it, and it really, really burnt me out. And it needed to be done. And so for me, I was looking at how can I continue to help them, but also value my time and expertise that I'm offering these clients. And so that's when I started formally doing pre-purchase inspections. So the pre-purchase inspections have been really, really helpful. They're different to what a building and pest inspection is, because the difference, and this is quite a common question that comes up, a pre-purchase inspection getting done by a property manager allows us to go through the property and do a private video or a private report for the client. And it allows us to go through and see anything visible that could be a concern. So there could be some light cracking in the walls, but we know from our experience that that's just settlement cracking and that it's not anything to be concerned about. We look underneath the kitchen sinks, because you can imagine when you're selling a property, you're not going to take a video under the kitchen sink or inside the bathroom vanities. And the amount of vanities that I've seen that have been waterlogged and moldy and smelly, where clients who have purchased have to replace them afterwards is incredible. So there's definitely things that investors weren't able to see from, the selling agent's photos. So we went through, we check anything visible, but we also, from a property manager's point of view, we can actually get a feel for that property. And would a tenant want to rent it? What's the rentability like? And that's something that we can offer as a property manager that not many other people can. So we can look through a property and say it doesn't have a bath and this home really needs a bath, or this property, the living space is too small in comparison to the room sizes. This is going to be a problem. We know who the target audience is for that property, so we can make sure that you are buying a property that's going to match the demographics of a suburb. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where a property manager doing a pre-purchase inspection can really bring value in comparison to a building inspector, where a building inspector is looking inside the roof. They're looking at termite damage. They're looking at the actual structure. They're not looking at the rentability of a property. So that's the vast difference. So the support, long question, I like to talk, Mike, but
no. This is gold.
Is that a property manager, the way that we've been able to help investors basically buy a property sight unseen is by doing those pre-purchase inspections prior, and to give it a bit of a rating. And my rating is very simple. I either say to them, the property's fantastic, put your best foot forward, there's no risks involved. Option 2, the property holds a couple of risks, and risks might be maybe the bedrooms are too small, maybe there's some work that needs to be done, maybe the kitchen's going to need to be renovated in the next couple of years. That property would be category 2, where if you can get the property for a great price, get it, but don't overspend for it, because there is work and risks that will be need to be taken into account. And option 3 is the property's crap and I wouldn't let my mum buy it. And if I wouldn't let my mum buy it, then I'll be telling you that as well. So very, very simple little formula, but it works. And that's sort of really where the property management support is so helpful for investors buying in Perth.
Yeah, because I suppose, pest and building, obviously crucially important, but pest and building people aren't going to be able to say, look, this one actually does match the demographics of the greatest need for properties in the area, or this one's actually going to be easy to rent. And it's not just the rental. I think from an investor's point of view, you want capital growth. And at some point, unfortunately, that's going to have to involve a valuer. And they're looking at, okay, well, what would be the demand for this? Not just from a tenant, but from a potential owner occupier in a sale. So we need to have a property that is of interest to a broad spectrum of people. And there are fundamentals around that. Like, does it have the right living spaces? Are the bedrooms too small? You'll never get that from a pest and building. So there's so much value to a PM doing that inspection. From my side of the fence, I've actually had a few buyer's agent reach out and say, oh, Mike, you have an inspection team across the country. Can you do inspections for us? I'm like, well, we look at very different things. We're looking at the construction, the type of materials, the plant and equipment items. We can do it. And they ask, how much would it cost? And I say, X. And they go, oh, well, we're getting property managers to do it for free, because, of course, the other side is that ideally you would get that management for that property, but you also kind of want to be in control of the properties that you manage as well, because I hear property managers saying all the time, like, I've sacked a few landlords because the property wasn't being maintained, or it was just too much of an effort. So you want to kind of control the stuff that's in your rent roll as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to make sure that if an investor is going to buy a property, that they've got if they're going to buy a property that's a little bit run down, we want them to know about it, and we want to set their expectations prior to them buying it, so they know what's going to be expected of them when doing maintenance. And so it's really just about setting those expectations, because like I say to clients, I don't mind if you want to buy a really old property, as long as you know that it's going to need about this much money spent on in the next 2 or 3 years. And you've been told that, and we've got a plan. So really, it's just about managing those expectations and not letting someone buy a property that they think is beautiful, that needs money spent on it. And if I can share a story about one just recently that I did, in Perth, obviously very, very hot market, and there isn't an opportunity sometimes to actually even do a pre-purchase inspection because selling agents are saying to clients, you just have to, put your offer in because, it's so hot.
And it's the truth, which is, uncommon for sales agents, if I want to be unkind, but it's actually the truth.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a client-centric market, that's for sure. So I'll go out to this property, and oh my Lord, if you had seen the advertising photos that the sales agent had used versus what I saw when I rocked up, it was, I felt terrible going back to the owner afterwards because he had purchased it. He was excited. There's no cooling off period, so he was stuck. And so I didn't want to sort of rip his heart out and say this property is shocking. So I delivered it in a way and said to him, it's a famous quote that I once heard was, don't worry about making the right decision, make the decision right. And I repeated that to him and I said, so this is what we're going to do. Anyway, this property had a backyard full of mattresses. Now, it was a tenanted property, but the poor tenant didn't actually have access to the backyard. Anyway, it was full of mattresses, full of tires. There was a brick wall that had fallen where the garage was and was currently leaning on a carport post. Oh. So this brick wall needs to be removed straight away, but because it's not attached to the house, it wasn't part of the building and pest. Inside the house, we had ceilings. They were all boarded up, like they had an extra beam along the middle that was screwed to hold each of the ceilings up. The gutters throughout the property on the outside were completely rotted to the point that half of them were missing and half of them were just like hanging by a thread. I could go on. It was a shocker. And so fortunately, it has a beautiful tenant in there who leased the property as is and was not complaining. But I just turned to the tenant and I said, listen, is there something that's really bothering you here that we can help sort out? And he said, actually, the fly screens aren't working. They're fallen apart. That would be really lovely to have them done. I said, done, I'll get it sorted. So we went back to the client and we said, listen, these are the items that the tenant has said are bothering him the most. I think it would be really lovely to keep him happy because he's a great tenant, and then let's do a maintenance plan for the rest. But at the end of the day, this client has paid premium price for this property, plus now he's got probably, I would say, an extra $20,000 that he's going to have to spend on this property without a doubt. Now, if he had a pre-purchase inspection done before and we told him about this work and told him it was going to cost $20,000, then he would have been able to take that into account and used it as some negotiation with his contract. Instead now, a property that he's paid $550 for, he's ultimately paying $570 for to get it up to scratch. And that's really going over what that property is maybe worth. So that's the risk that investors are taking by not getting it checked prior. And I could go as far as saying it was false advertising, this sales listing. Yeah. They were photos of the property, but they were photos of the property from a couple of years ago from maybe a previous tenant, not for this property. And it was sad, but that's where a property manager can really advocate for a investor. And even in this situation, settlement, I think, is actually happening today on this property. But the support that we've actually been to this poor investor to say, these things haven't been done. You need to push your settlement agent to get this sorted. We've been able to be a bit of a sounding board to make sure that he's not taken advantage of. Fortunately, he does have a good settlement agent, but But who's there for the investor if a property manager or a buyer's agent's not? They don't have anyone. And, we went back to him and said, the mattresses still aren't taken out from the back. You need to go back and tell them that we're withholding $2,000 from settlement because we need 2 skip-ins. We need a day's labour. This is how much it's going to cost. Get that agreement before you settle, because otherwise it's going to be your problem. So I feel crappy situation for the landlord, but I'm very thankful that he's had us on his side to help him and support him get this sorted. And the value that we bring is that's incredible, in my opinion.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've already provided a huge amount of value, but just imagine the value you could provide if you were engaged a little bit sooner.
Yeah. Absolutely. And most do, like 90% of clients do. It's a very small portion that just maybe they don't value, paying for a pre-purchase inspection, which is very minimal anyway. Maybe they just don't have, maybe they don't have the insight. I'm not sure what it is, but you quickly find out that it's worth every little penny.
Look, I agree that the value that a property manager provides is massive, but it kind of does seem like it's a constant battle for property managers to prove that value. And it's an industry where, like other industries, we are seeing a bit of a race to the bottom. So hopefully investors listening to this will realize that it's not just about penny pinching on the price. It's about the service that you get. Now, you sort of push in the other direction. And I was having a conversation with a buyer's agent yesterday about being a good client. So we have this notion that, let's say, if I'm paying you money, then it's not incumbent on me to be anything to you. You just have to do your job. But I actually kind of think if I'm a good person to work with, you're going to be more motivated. You're actually going to give me a better service. And you've come up with a new kind of platform or a series on how to be a landlord. Now, I find that really interesting. And I think given the data that we're sort of seeing, the average property investor only owns one. We're seeing data now where amongst our data sample that the average distance people are buying from where they live is 1,500 kilometres, which is insane. I want to ask you about that. What is it? What sort of education do you give to landlords in how to be a good landlord, and where are you kind of seeing them finding value in that series? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
Yeah, I've just started it and I'm having a great response from it. And it is making, again, probably very selfish reasons when I think of these ideas, but it's when I get common questions from investors and I really realise that in WA, they don't understand our tenancy laws. It's so different state to state. And so you can imagine these investors are so used to Sydney and, Victorian laws, and then they have WA laws, which are different. And they just assume that, what they have is correct. So How to Be a Landlord series really is a way for me to educate in bulk all our clients to make our jobs easier as well, but just to make sure that they understand where we're coming from and really gain that trust with being sort of a thought leader and a property management expert as well for them. And little things that come up. The first video that I did for clients, and I'm not talking about your boring videos that are generic. I'm talking about very specific issues. So the first one that we sent off to all our clients yesterday was what to do if you can't afford maintenance. So this is coming up a bit with clients. With their interest rates have gone up, maybe they're stuck and they can't increase the rents just yet. So what to do if you can't pay, for maintenance. Now, the first thing to know as a landlord is you can't not do certain maintenance because you can't afford it. Unfortunately, It's not the tenant's problem that you're having financial struggles. As harsh as that may seem, it's the truth. So understanding what you're responsible for, what you are required by law to do, and what can be held off and created into a maintenance plan. So that is the first step. The second advice that I give to clients that can't afford maintenance is to look at other options. So fortunately in our business, we use a really great maintenance program called TAPI that does allow that allows payment plans, for big bills or for any bills, to be honest. That's really great. And then in some other situations where I've had a client that really has been in a bit of distress, as a business, we've been very fortunate to be able to cover that cost for that landlord and say, listen, we'll split your payments over the next 3 months so that we can get that aircon replaced because it's summer, or, we might have been time sensitive in something. And not every business can do that, but we have been able to do that for some clients as well, which just makes our life easier, helps the client out. The tenant's happy because they've got their aircon fixed. So there's ways that you can communicate to a property manager to let them know, if you are struggling, because I think a lot of landlords can sometimes just default and just decline maintenance or not get back to the property manager and try and brush it under the rug. And that's not the right option. It's better just to say to a property manager, is this something that I have to action urgently, or could it wait for a few months? And trust your property manager when they give you that advice. If they say, no, it has to be done now, then maybe ask that question. Do you have any facilities to allow me to go on a payment plan for it so that we can still get it done? Or, ask them the question. And a part of me thinks that it is our job as property managers to educate clients and let them know what's available to them as well. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. So fortunately, that's something that we are doing. But if your property manager doesn't do that, then just ask the question, and you might be surprised at how helpful they actually can be, because we are here literally to help clients and help tenants and make sure everything works harmoniously as well. So that's sort of just an example of how to be a landlord. And then, the same things, we go down the road of that tax depreciation, reminding them of the need for tax depreciation on the property. If they haven't got one done or they haven't heard about it, sending through that initial email to you guys to say, listen, is this property worth getting done or not? That's always helpful. But it's an interesting topic, isn't it? Because part of me used to think, at what point does a property manager have to not educate clients? If you're an investor and you're buying a property, should you not know all this? Should that not be part of your own research and experience? It falls onto a property manager's shoulder. And I do sometimes fight with that thought is, well, is it my problem to worry and educate about making sure you get the most out of your tax return? Is that a property manager's role or not? I don't know.
Yeah, look, I think ideally they would be transacting already furnished with that knowledge, because this is not play money. These are big decisions. They're massive financial decisions, and outside the purchase of their own home might be their number one decision that they ever make. So you would hope they come in eyes wide open. But I guess I see it as an opportunity for a property manager to show that they're not rent collectors. They do actually understand the science of investing and all of the requirements there. But yeah, I can see why you're kind of tussling with that one. I want to ask, sorry, Ash.
Oh, no, I was just, agreeing with that.
I want to ask the elephant in the room question about the Perth market. Now, I know that you're not a property economist, but you're seeing stuff on the ground every day. Perth, there's no doubt the market has been going gangbusters. People have had some great success there, but I caution people to consider where we're at in the cycle, and that there are two important things about Perth that bear bear remembering. One is that the median price of Perth property was once higher than Sydney. That did happen. That is a fact. And there was also 16 years where the median house price stayed exactly the same. Now, the best time to buy in Perth was, if not yesterday, a couple of years ago before the run started. But where do you kind of sit with it in the cycle? So much eastern states money has come into the WA property investment market. We're hearing lots of anecdotal stories about, people like the investor example that you had that just was really pressured into making that decision because it would be snapped up by someone else, people that are paying a little bit of a premium to get in there. Where do you sort of land with it at the moment?
Yeah, so I work with a high volume of buyers agents and private clients at the moment. So I feel like I've got a pretty good on the ground assessment of what's happening. So we definitely, yes, 3 years ago, everyone was looking for that minimum 700 square meter block, and they were very specific with that. Then we have seen in the last 6 months with affordability, people still are coming to us with a budget of around 450,000, which is not possible to buy a house on 700 square meters anymore. And I'm finding that they are reducing their block size requirements more now than what they were doing before. So they still want to get into the market, but instead of looking for a 700 square meter block, they are now looking at townhouses and villas in a small complex with very, very small, strata levies.
Right. Yeah.
So there's definitely been a change in that buying. We are finding that the defaulting rental stress is coming from an area that was first busy. So that Rockingham area, which was first popular with interstate investors, we are now seeing rental stress in that area, and we are seeing more court applications being made and more debt. Now, what I'm worried about is that that's going to flow through to the second area that became really popular, which is in Armidale and that Armidale area. And I'm worried that that stress is going to continue there, but time will tell. So far, it's so good. So far, it's, not too bad at all. So I would say that we've still got another good couple of years with growth. I would say that we've probably got another 20% growth in our market to go over the next 2 years. I don't think the economists can really, foresee past that 2 years. No. But I think we have got, it's still a good place to buy. And I think the affordability is still so low in Perth. So tenants really that are applying for properties are still applying for properties with less than 30% affordability, which means that when they apply for a property, when they buy a property in Perth, they need to make sure that their rent doesn't exceed 30% of their household income. Now, that's quite low. So most tenants are still applying 17%, 20%. And that's going against what the media is saying, where we're seeing people that are paying 75% of their family income on rent in places like Sydney. So part of me thinks that we still, from a rental growth point of view, still have a lot of room to go, because if they're only paying 30% in Perth, I feel like there's room for them to be paying up to 50%. Now, I know tenants that are listening are not going to be happy to hear that, but I just feel that we still have a buffer up to about 50%. The only thing that's going to change our market and improve improve it for tenants and renters is if the building industry can start building homes quicker. That's a massive, massive problem in WA, and there's just not enough homes, and the amount of people that are migrating over to Perth is huge. So until our building industry recovers, I think it's going to continue getting worse. And the reason why we have a bit of a building industry issue is because we have, a lot of FIFO workers in the mines. And so tradespeople can earn a lot more money working up in the mines than what they can, sweltering in the sun, bricklaying.
Yes.
That's not that fun, is it? And not when you can do FIFO and only work 6 months of the year and still earn a few $100,000 a year. So until the building industry revives, I don't see there being any more hope there. But do you know what else is really interesting so our office manages sort of over 1,000 properties spread out all over Perth. So we've got a good insight of what's happening everywhere. You would think with the rental crisis, we would be seeing more house sharing. Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a little bit of it, but not enough to suggest that there's a massive crisis. So I'm not seeing that. I'm just recently, yesterday, had a couple of brothers that rent a property. One of the brothers decided to move out, and the single brother's going to stay there, paying in a 4x2 by himself, paying the full rent, no problems. So it's really interesting. I don't see that increasing, and I feel like that should be happening more if we've really got some true stress in the rental market.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And given that so much investment has come in to Greater Perth, I would have been expecting that the vacancy rate would rise to some degree because tenants are getting more and more spoilt for choice. But is it just that it was so tight and it was such a low base that there's actually quite a lot more needed to reach like what we've always kind of called a bit of an equilibrium in that 2 to 3%, which these days seems incredibly high as a vacancy?
Yeah, because I think we're at about 0.7 or 0.8% at the moment.
It's crazy.
But then, do you know, again, in the media, they only show you those homes that are getting hundreds of people through the home opens. And where we're finding massive home opens is actually in the 1 to 2 bedroom unit space. Right. And the smaller units around that $450 per week are getting smashed with inquiries. And generally because, in WA, we've got a lot of students coming over and that's what they're looking for. So that's very popular. But when it comes to houses, we might only get 5 people through a home open, maybe 10 people through a home open. The interesting thing is, despite being a rental crisis, people are not prepared to overpay for a rental. Tenants will not give a landlord a ridiculous amount of money for rent if they don't think the property's worth it. And that's a real big misconception that I think some investors have, where they think, well, it's a rental crisis. I can put any price on for my property and people will rent it because there's nothing available. They won't. And a really great example we had the other week was a property, really nice, decent suburban home. We had it on for $600 per week, which was, I think we recommended about $550, $570 per week. Client wanted $600, put it on for $600. We had no one, 0 people turn up to a home open. So we said to the client, we have to reduce it. He let us reduce it to $580 per week. We got 30 people through the home open.
Wow.
You wouldn't have thought that a $20 difference would have made a big difference with the number of in the home open, and that was the difference between getting lots of inquiries versus not. So that's very interesting.
That is very interesting. I guess that's a psychological barrier that people weren't prepared to cross for that type of property, and maybe even one of those realestate.com filters. I'll pay between 500 and 600, and if you're at 600, you're not in that filter sort of thing. But that's interesting to note, is that you can't just write your own check in the rental market in WA. There is still some choice for renters there, and being able to bunk up with other people, I suppose, as well.
And if we could talk and just about the psychological side of marketing, that is super interesting, because that's what we're seeing a lot of selling agents doing at the moment, where they are pricing properties quite low and they're getting massive inquiries because that's what's driving their price up. And then for clients, they then get into that competitive mode where they are then just want to be the winner, if that makes sense. And so we're seeing properties go quite a bit over and above the asking price. But I do stress to investors that if someone is advertising a property from, let's say, from $530,000, and you pay $580,000 for it, you're not overpaying $50,000. 580 is the market rate for that property, but it's a marketing technique that agents used for pricing a property under market to get all those inquiries. And same happens from a rental point of view. We had a property where a while ago we advertised it for 500 a week, had no inquiries on this property. This is going back a couple of years ago. No inquiries at 500 a week. We said to the owner, we're going to have to drop it down. We dropped it down to 475. We had 80 people through this home open, massive at 475. But what was the funny thing was that the offers we got on the applications were over 500. We got offers for 510, 530, 550 per week for the property. And it's like, did you not see this property being advertised the other week for 500? But psychologically, putting it on for 480, creating that demand and that interest, then people are offering more based on what they feel the property's worth. It's such an interesting game, like human nature, isn't it?
That is very interesting, because you kind of want to say to them, look, you would have secured that at 500, less than you've offered, like if you just showed up. But that's, I mean, we can't blame the real estate agents as much as I'd like to. I mean, their responsibility is to get the best price, right? Of course, we don't want underquoting, but they'll play the margins as best they can. But it is important to understand that, you know, the market value, the guide price, the selling price, they don't always line up, and you need experts like yourself in the mix to make sure that you're not falling foul of some of those techniques when you're purchasing these properties. Ash, it's always a pleasure chatting to you, and I lament the fact that we have to stop at some point, but I'd love to have you back in the next little while just to see what's happening with WA, and I certainly hope it's true that there is quite a bit to run for those investors that have piled in the last little while. But thank you very much for sharing all of your gold today.
My pleasure, Mike.
Cheers.